Let's bring in Democratic Congresswoman Barbara Lee of California. She's not too far away from the epicenter of these rallies. She's a member of the Appropriations Committee and the Congressional Black Caucus. Congresswoman Lee, welcome and thank you for being here. I want to get back to what Sarah Huckabee Sanders was saying the other day, that the Stephon Clark shooting is a local matter. So in keeping with that, I want to get your take on the broader question of why the justice appears to be so reluctant to pursue these cases. How do you see it? What is the reasoning?
First, the shooting of unarmed black men is a national crisis. My heart is broken today, like many. And our condolences and prayers go out to Stephon's family and friends, but that's not enough. We, like the NAACP, Black Lives Matter, the protesters, are seeking justice and police accountability. For the life of me, I don't understand why the president has said this is a local problem when we know that it is a national crisis. You can just look at the number of unarmed black men who have been shot. And I have to just ask you, if in fact Stephon were white, with a cell phone, would he have been shot 20 times, 8 times, 7 times in the back, 20 shots were fired, he was hit 8 times. Would that have happened if he were white? So we have to deal with systemic and institutional racism, and we have to deal with accountability. And yes, we have to have some federal jurisdiction and accountability and some federal policies that insist that the local police departments do not engage in unarmed shooting of African-American men. This is tragic, and once again, justice must be served.
Yeah, I got to tell you, I can't even listen to the audio of those gunshots from the police, 20 so fast. It's horrifying to listen to. But the Congressional Black Caucus, ma'am, have you given up on trying to meet with the president on these kinds of shootings? And if so, is there any way to work around the president and try and get this administration to address this, as you say, national crisis?
This administration, and I think President just recently said, as it relates to Stephon's murder, that this is a local issue. Members of the Congressional Black Caucus met with the president early on. Remember, the president said, "What do you have to lose?" Members of the Congressional Black Caucus gave him an agenda. To this date, he has not responded to that agenda. We have to work around this president, but then when you have an attorney general such as Jeff Sessions, who continues to roll back civil rights protections, voting rights protections as it relates to moving forward on criminal justice reform, you have an administration headed by Donald Trump who really does not seem to care as it relates to criminal justice reform and what is taking place in terms of this being a national crisis, in terms of police misconduct and police brutality. And so we have to work around him. Hopefully members of the House and the Senate will begin to understand what we've been saying for many, many, many years. I raised 2 African-American sons. I had these conversations with them in the 1970s, mind you. And so
what kind of conversations as a mom did you have to have? Did you have to tell them, what did you tell them as you were bringing them up to ensure their safety?
I told them how to behave. Don't walk here, don't walk there, don't dress this way, don't have this in your pocket. Let me take you down the street. You know, when you see police officers, regardless of your innocence, don't talk back. You know, be careful. Those conversations take place today among African-American families, especially with African-American young men, and that is un-American. We shouldn't have to live like this. We should not have to live in fear, and we should not have to have these really abnormal conversations with young people about the possibility of being shot. And that's not to say that all police officers engage in misconduct. You know, for the most part, they're there for our public safety. But when you look at the disproportionate numbers of African-American men who have been unarmed and shot, there's a crisis, and we have to talk to our young people, as I did my young boys and my 2 grandsons now, and that is a shame, and it's a disgrace, and it's so sad.
Yeah. It absolutely is. Amen to that. In the last hour, I had the pleasure of speaking with Martin Luther King III on this matter, as well as his father's legacy. I want to play part of that discussion for you.
My dad wanted to eradicate what he called the triple evils of poverty, racism, militarism, and violence. Obviously, we've not achieved those objectives, so we have a lot of work left to do. But I'm very excited because we see a high school student-led movement to address the issue of guns. We haven't seen that since 1963, when 3,000 kids left the schools of Birmingham and were arrested. So I'm actually very excited.
What are your thoughts as this nation prepares to honor Dr. King's life this Wednesday?
Sure, I will be in Memphis honoring and commemorating Dr. King's life. And I just have to say that speech that he gave at Riverside Church a year before he was killed, he talked about the triple evils, as Martin Luther King III just mentioned: racism, poverty, and militarism. And we have to reflect upon where we were then and where we are now. When you look at militarism, we're looking now at a defense budget that's over $700 billion, wars that are unauthorized, $125 billion in waste, fraud, and abuse, yet no one's saying anything. These funds could be used for building schools and affordable housing, and for all of our economic issues, better wages, for a better future for everyone. When you look at racism, recently Senator Harris, who was a member of the Kerner Commission report, he came out with a book, and we're going to talk about this on the Hill shortly, as it relates to the still racial inequality and disparities, and economic disparities and racial disparities. When you look at young black boys and the expulsion rates and suspension rates in our schools, we have a long way to go. When you look at all of the issues around racism, militarism, and poverty, when you look at poverty, which affects every community in our country, disproportionately African American and Latinos, we've come a heck of a long way, because many, many, many more people would be living below the poverty line had we not had the war on poverty. But here we are now, the wealthiest country in the world, and budget proposals that would begin to unravel many of the initiatives that have lifted people out of poverty. So Dr. King's life, his legacy, what he was about as a revolutionary, which is what he was, is to be remembered as a person who led the charge against racism, militarism, and poverty. That's what we have to continue to fight against, and for a better future for everyone.
Well said, Democratic Congresswoman Barbara Lee of California. Thank you so much for joining me on this holiday weekend.